everyone, and thank you for joining us today in our Horeca Challenge. My name is Alexandra Alegría, and I will be the moderator for our web talk today. The Horeca Challenge is sponsored by Alimentec. Alimentec is the leading trade show in the food and beverage as hospitality industry in the Andean region, Central America, and the Caribbean. With the expertise of trade show organizers, Corferias and Colmese, Alimentec has become the meeting point for top industry players in Latin America. Alimentec is the sister trade show of Anuga. Anuga is the world's biggest and most important business platform for the food and beverage industry, and thus the benchmark for all of the food fairs. Alimentec is a biannual show, and for its 2021 edition, it is expected to have more than 550 exhibitors from different parts of the world and around 29,000 professional buyers attending our show. Its next 2021 edition has been recently postponed to June 8th to the 11th of this year. As trade show organizers, we consider that we not only have to implement the highest standards of safety protocols, but that we also need to consider the right timing for a show to take place. In this occasion, we believe that June will not only have all the travel restrictions that we currently have in Colombia lifted, but that we will be able to have additional time to provide the experiences our exhibitors and visitors expect and deserve. For more information on our trade show, please visit our webpage at feriaalimentec.com. Today in our Horeca Challenge, we will be discovering how the hospitality industry is taking proactive steps to mitigate the COVID-19 impact, as well as learn how it is considering its recovery. Industry experts from the Cruise Lines Association, the National Restaurant Association Show, and the Colombian Association of Gastronomy will be sharing their experiences on the comeback of cruising and reopening of restaurants and hotels around the world. If you have any questions during our presentations, please type them into the question box in your WebEx control panel, and I will be bringing them up during the end of each presentation. Now, with no further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Richard Reagan, Director of Partner Relations of the Cruise Lines International Association. With more than 300 ocean-going and river cruise lines vessels, and with more than 30 million guests taking a cruise ship last year, cruise lines had to come to a complete stop during our coronavirus situation. In this session, Mr. Reagan will let us know how cruise ships respond to the global health pandemic and how they prepare to restart sailing again. Welcome, Mr. Reagan. The speech is all yours.
Thanks very much, Alexandra, and good day, everyone. It's good to be with you. Thanks so much also to Leslie Fleck at Anuga, and again to you, Alexandra, and Christian, the Alimentec team, for having me speaking here today. Again, I'm Richard Reagan, the Director of Partner Relations for the Executive Partner Program at Cruise Lines International Association, or CLIA. And as Alexandra said, I'm going to cover a number of areas, including how we've responded to the pandemic that we've all been facing. But before that, maybe on a little bit of a lighter note, I would love to have everybody here in the audience, and I think we're probably approaching 200 people at least or so, to let us know if you've been on a cruise before, and indeed where you might have gone on your cruise. You could use the chat feature in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Again, if you've taken a cruise, we'd love to know where you've gone. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, so just bear with me. Okay, so as I had mentioned, I'm going to cover a number of areas actually today, and certainly the pandemic being one of them. But I'd also like to give you some information and some background about our association and what we do. Clearly, again, talking about the elephant in the room, which is the COVID crisis. After that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our executive partner program and specifically my hotel operations and food and beverage initiative. And lastly, I'll give you some general insight about the cruise industry and the food and beverage supply chain as related to at least one of our members, and let you know about some of the challenges they face and also maybe some opportunities for becoming a supplier to the cruise segment. And I'm hoping to do all of that in the next 20 minutes or so. So to start off, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about CLIA. Established in 1975, the Cruise Lines International Association, or CLIA, as we are referred to, is the world's largest cruise industry trade association. And we are the unified global organization helping our cruise line members succeed by advocating, educating, and promoting for the common interests of the entire cruise community.
Sorry, I will interrupt. We are not able to see your presentation. I don't know if you're being able to share it with us.
I thought I was sharing the screen here. Just bear with me.
Okay. There we go. That's perfect. We're starting to see something. Maybe if you make it a complete, the whole image instead of. Yeah, maybe if you click in presentations, current slide, maybe you can make that bigger. But if not, we're seeing your presentation now. There we go. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, there we go. Okay, thanks for that. Sorry. So again, the Cruise Line International Association is the unified global organization helping our members to succeed by advocating, educating, and promoting the common interests of the entire cruise community. Let's see if we can go to the next one. Okay. Our association is made up of the following member communities. So we have our cruise line members, which are currently more than 57 cruise line brands. We have more than 15,000 travel agencies as part of our membership. More than 50,000 individual travel agents are trained and accredited by CLIA to sell the cruises. And the community in which my program, the Hotel Operations, Food and Beverage community, sits, it's called the Executive Partner Program, where we have more than 400 supplier members there who serve the cruise industry. So here are some of the 55 cruise line brands that we have in our membership. These folks make up a good portion of the CLIA cruise lines. You might recognize some of these, certainly Carnival, Royal Caribbean, MSC, maybe some of the others. And our organization is headed by a global executive committee, which is made up of the leadership of the world's major cruise lines, so from Carnival, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, and some of the others. So here's our global executive committee. And then we also have a Europe executive committee as well, the leadership from the European brands such as Costa, MSC, Royal Caribbean, Carnival, UK, and some of the others. Both of these committees essentially steer our association's activities, and they guide us on how we can best serve our members. So before we move on to discussing the hotel food and beverage program and the opportunities with the cruise industry, I wanted to let you know a little bit more about how the cruise industry has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and how we've responded and how we're moving forward as an industry. So starting in early February of this year, there were more than 3,700 passengers aboard the Diamond Princess cruise vessel, which is owned by Carnival Corporation. And they all went under quarantine in Yokohama, Japan, after a former passenger who was on board tested positive for the coronavirus after disembarking the ship. The local Japanese government would not allow any other passengers on board the Diamond Princess to disembark at that moment. So they were all on board, and by the 20th of February, about 2 weeks later, we had 635 passengers on board the ship who tested positive for the virus. And thus began our well-publicized, I would say, experience with COVID-19. So after numerous positive tests aboard other cruise ships and an onslaught of negative media coverage, we as an industry voluntarily paused our fleet's operations on March 13th of this year. And the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, subsequently ordered a no-sail order for all cruise vessels in the U.S. waters. So the pause in operation continues even today. The CDC, who extended their no-sail order imposed upon us 2 times during the course of the last many months, will ultimately expire. The order itself will ultimately expire this Saturday, the 31st. So certainly it's a day that all of us in the cruise industry have been highly anticipating. So our actions against this backdrop was really with a response where we put the safety and the passengers, safety of our passengers and crew first. This also included, the pause in operations that we imposed on the 13th of March, but it included just getting the guests and crew who were still on voyages safely home at that time. And this really proved to be extremely challenging, as many ports would not allow passengers to disembark. And also, compiled with the many layers of travel restrictions, we ultimately had to repatriate tens of thousands of crew members by sailing them back to their home countries around the world, places like Indonesia and the Philippines. So it was quite an undertaking. The second phase of our plan during this process was the recovery or our rebuilding phase, which essentially included our reclaiming the media narrative with factual data and using real-world statistics to start to build or rebuild public confidence. So there was quite a bit of collaboration in that phase with national and local authorities, port authorities, also, worldwide, and apprising them of the progress and the plans, during this phase. The third phase during this roadmap that we developed was the reinvention phase, and which is the phase that we're actually in at the moment, transitioning to our fourth phase. But this is where we're really working towards the resumption of operations. Over the past many months, we have been developing new sets of guidelines and protocols with global experts in epidemiology and public health, developing, again, new guidelines and protocols, which we will implement industry-wide and fleet-wide, ultimately enabling our restart. So again, we're now in the last stages of that process. And then finally, the final phase, which we're heading towards, is the resumption of our operations, and essentially resuming our cruise itineraries with these strict and robust health protocols in place. So as an industry, again, we've already begun some of our cruise itineraries in Europe, out of Hamburg and through the Mediterranean. We've been on some of those itineraries for a few months now, and generally things have gone well, but there have been some test positives on these voyages. But the protocols for testing and quarantining and tracing and disembarking ill passengers have been working, and we've really done well in terms of mitigating any spread of COVID-19 on board those vessels. Early in our response phase, I talked about some of our key messaging and how we were kind of shaping and taking control of the media narrative. Included in that messaging, I mean, that we've been putting out during that time was around, the economic importance of the cruise industry, and that the cruise industry contributes $150 billion to the overall global economy. We create more than 1 million jobs worldwide. We pay out $50 billion in wages. That for each day that cruising is paused, there are about 2,500 jobs that are lost. And through last month, through September, there had been a loss to the global economy of around $77 billion due to the operational stoppage. And that 23 billion in wages have been lost worldwide since the cruise industry has paused operations back in March. So some of the core elements in terms of our protocols and some of the guidelines that we are now imposing, and we actually presented to the CDC last month, was actually contained in a 65-page report, which outlined 74 separate health and safety protocols, which will be undertaken on each cruise itinerary as our sailings resume. So core elements of our new health and safety guidelines, again, which the entire cruise industry will adapt to and carry out, include 100% testing of passengers and crew. So they're tested at embarkation and then during the voyage. We also have on-board procedures with masks and face coverings to be worn, proper physical distancing, upgraded ventilation systems with antimicrobial technologies. This is just part of what we're doing on board. And then the third area, essentially, are public health systems and new processes put into place where we have 24/7 communications, where we're reporting the results of health screenings and evaluations. And, we're planning, and we have contingencies, actually certainly more robust contingencies now for isolation if required, responding with disembarkation of anyone who might fall ill, and prearranged evacuations if needed. And then last off, if anyone's been on a cruise, you certainly know that shore excursions and tour operations are a big part of the voyage. And, for our tour operations, all tour operators must conform to the aforementioned health protocols and the coordination of the guidelines with port and destination authorities. So, if any of the above are violated by passenger and crew during a voyage, essentially they're denied reboarding the vessel. So we take all of this extremely seriously, obviously, at this stage. If you'd like to learn more about what we as the cruise industry are doing to get back to our resumption of operations, you can go to our website, cruising.org, and you'll find a resources and toolkit page there with several areas summarizing, again, what we're doing from the standpoint of keeping our passengers and crew healthy and safety going forward. So I'd like to turn now to letting you know a little bit more about CLIA's Executive Partner Program. and specifically our hotel operations, food and beverage community, as well as some more information about the cruise industry and the food and beverage supply chain which provision our fleet. The CLIA Executive Partner Program, or the EP program as we call it, is comprised of 3 communities which serve their respective segments with the cruise lines, and they are the port and destinations, the travel community, the maritime and technical services community, and the newest community, which is my community, the hotel operations, food and beverage community. This is the area I think that most of you would be involved in from a food and beverage supply chain standpoint. So our mission within the EP program is to offer an exclusive platform for our members to provide them key access to decision makers within the cruise lines, as well as other industry stakeholders to better enable them to build their businesses and gain important insight and expand their influence with the cruise industry at large. So that brings us to the hotel operations food and beverage program. We started this membership program in mid-2019, so we are a very new community of primarily food and beverage manufacturers, producers, and distributors. The program was started essentially at the request of the food and beverage procurement leadership at our major cruise line members, as they had expressed a need for better interaction with the suppliers who support the F&B supply chain to their vessels. That leadership has formed our HFB working group, and these individuals guide us and oversee our activities. So currently, our working group consists of these 5 individuals, all of whom are the most senior leaders from the food and beverage procurement and supply chain areas from Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian Cruise Lines, MSC, and Virgin Voyages. So again, our HFB partner membership program is about 1.5 years old. We currently have a little more than 70 supplier partners in the program. And here's a sample of some of the food and beverage suppliers who make up our community. So activities within our HFB community include conferences and educational programs, networking dinners and receptions. So these are some photos from a recent conference that we did in Miami. The other area that we serve is essentially one-to-one business matching with food and beverage suppliers to their corresponding buyers at our cruise line members. Again, some photos here from a recent one-to-one business matching program we did, where we had about 90 buyers from 14 separate cruise brands meeting with about 200 suppliers. I think we facilitated over 700 one-to-one meetings during this particular session. So it was really productive. So in 2021, we've already begun planning our HFB activities, which include our annual Business on the Bay reception in Miami Beach that happens alongside the Sea Trade Cruise Convention. This is really a great networking event. Our annual business conference, partner dinner and golf outing, and ongoing webinars and video calls. Again, as we look forward to 2021 with the hopes that many of these live activities will be possible as we get towards the second half of the year. We also plan to have delegations of cruise line F&B buyers present at several industry events. And again, whether the events happen live or online, we would like to be part of these as well. And we're coordinating with the Vibe Wine Conference, the Hospitality Design Expo in Las Vegas, the National Restaurant Show, where we brought the delegation in 2019 and held a nice conference program there for the exhibitors with some of the leadership of the food and beverage supply chain. We'll also do the Summer Fancy Food Show in New York, and then Anuga in Cologne when all of those get running up and running again. So that covers some information about the Executive Partner Program and what we're doing within hotel operations and the food and beverage community. I'd just like to round out my presentation today by taking a quick look at the cruise line segment and the F&B demand, as well as the potential opportunities for becoming a supplier to the cruise lines. So the growth of the cruise industry has been pretty significant. This is a 10-year snapshot of passenger capacity, where the industry has essentially experienced a growth of 12 million new passengers in a 10-year period, and where 2019 saw more than 30 million passengers taking a cruise. Again, looking at 2020 and with the pandemic, this has pretty much fallen off a cliff at this stage. So we're reworking a lot of this business at this stage as we head into 2021. But when you consider, 30 million passengers eating 3 meals a day, having many snacks in between, and consuming a lot of adult beverages and soft beverages, you begin to understand that the food and beverage supply chain for the cruise sector is fairly significant. To give you just a quick example, we'll take the 4 largest cruise ships in the Caribbean, the Royal Caribbean fleet, and these are known as Oasis class ships. And each one of these vessels could carry over 5,000 passengers and have about 2,200 crew members on board. And during normal operations, these ships are cruising every week of the year. And when at their capacity, a combined 20,000 passengers and 9,000 crew members per week. 5th Oasis class ship arriving in 2022 called Wonder of the Seas. But if you refer to the lower left portion of this slide, you can see some general data related to weekly consumption for certain categories for each one of these Oasis class ships. Looking back at 2018, the F&B overall spend was 770 million from Royal Caribbean, and then the weekly consumption on board one of these vessels at 97,000 eggs, almost 30,000 bottles of beer, 8,500 bottles of wine, 26,000 pounds of beef, 4,500 bottles of spirits, and so on. And we hadn't even gotten to dessert yet. So this is just some of the core center of plate and bar and beverage commodities. This is an example of the very high volumes of the food and beverage demand by the cruise segment. And again, full disclaimer, as we're all fully aware that these figures were taken years from 2018 and 2019. I mean, 2020 has obviously been a write-off. And as we phase back into service in 2021, our capacities will be drawn back slightly. But we're slowly, the plan is to slowly ramp back up through 2021 and into 2022. Some of the areas of priority noted by Royal Caribbean here, but not common throughout all of our are common throughout all of the member lines are, on-time delivery by the suppliers. This is really important. During a turnaround at port, a cruise vessel has approximately 6 to 8 hours to be provisioned with tens of thousands of separate items. Dozens of tractor trailers arrive to load onto the ship. And if a supplier misses their scheduled time slot and the cruise line needs to go out for an emergency order, it's really disruptive and costly. Sustainable sourcing is another big priority where we've been mandated to lessen, obviously, we want to be good stewards of the environment and lessen our impact on the environment. A few ways we're doing that are by using sustainable alternatives to plastics. We're buying sustainably certified seafoods. There are company goals across the supply chain for humanely raised chickens and cage-free eggs. These are just a few examples. And just a third area of focus is the development of menus with regional focus, primarily, in the Asian, South Asian, Eastern Mediterranean, Latin American, and South American voyages. Significant resources go into the sourcing of quality regional ingredients and then developing menus which appeal to the regional and cultural tastes. And the last point I just wanted to make in the presentation, and related to what I've just been talking about, if your objectives are to build your business and a relationship with the cruise lines, certainly consider the quality of your product and your services, how you will add value for your cruise line customer, how you can be become part of the overall value chain. I'm certainly putting forward your capabilities to assist the culinary operations teams with the development of their menus. And then, again, consider your logistics capabilities, how you can support the various cruise brands, at the ports of call. So again, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. This concludes my presentation. I hope that you found it to be informative. I'm happy to take questions now, or, again, please find my contact details here and follow up with me if you need more information. Thanks again.
Thank you, Richard, for your presentation. Well, actually, we do have some questions that came up during your presentation. One of them is from Mary Pat. She's asking, when do you see the resumption of cruising in the United States?
Yeah, so, again, we have paused as an industry. We did so voluntarily, back in March. And we've been doing that for months. We've been extending our pauses and really looking out for the obviously the health and safety of the crew members and of guests and passengers. And alongside our voluntary pausing operations, the Centers for Disease Controls has put a no sail order on us as well, and that had been extended a few times. Again, that ends this Saturday, the 31st. Already, some of the cruise brands are bringing personnel back in South Florida and some of the other ports, with an eye towards resuming. This will be a phased-in approach. Potentially, there could be some test sailings this year. We don't have any firm commitments on that. But it will be certain, I think, that you'll see sailings really start to first and second quarters of 2021.
Thank you. We have another question here. It says, how are cruise lines working to build passenger confidence so that we can cruise again?
Well, that's, I think, really the most important question there. And, over the past 8 months or so, we, as an industry, have gone to significant, to ensure that not only the protocols and the guidelines that we put into place to keep our guests healthy are implemented in a very robust way, but also the vessels themselves are being sort of revitalized to ensure that, for instance, the airflow systems and the HVAC systems are now being treated with antimicrobial, processes. There are just so many new protocols and procedures that we've undertaken. And as I mentioned, we have all of those in a report to the Centers for Disease Control. And there's more than 70 separate protocol lines and things that we're doing. And as I think, as the itineraries start to resume slowly and we start to show the cruising public that we can do this successfully and, keep people healthy and safe, I think the more confident that the cruising public will become.
Okay. We have another question from Zach Bloomer. He says, what is the average level of food waste pre-pandemic on a cruise? Percentage of cruise revenue or pounds lost? One of the questions. Maybe just let us know about the food waste now that we have all these.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a really great question. And even, pre-pandemic, that has been a real concern by our industry. And, from a sustainability perspective, I mean, that falls under that umbrella. And we're working with many vendors and people that provide solutions out there to mitigate and eliminate food waste, because that's a huge issue. So it's something that we've been working on. I mean, to give specifics right now, to give data, I'd have to research that a little bit. I don't have that right off the top of my head, but happy to take that offline and speak further on that.
Okay. And we'll definitely put up Richard's information in our chat so you can contact him directly. I will read this last one. It says, will there be any specific trends needs cruise ships are requiring in terms of food supply or special packaging once sailing resumes? I guess maybe trends in food and beverage and special needs that you're requiring right now in our cruise ships.
Again, a really good question. And as we speak with our cruise line members, and particularly the folks that are developing menus and overseeing culinary operations, we do think that there'll be a few trends that we'll see on board the cruise vessels, much in the same way that we'll see on land as well. So grab and go, for instance, might be something that is more prominent, as we start to sail again, rather than large clusters of people gathering in the dining rooms, even socially distanced. A grab and go is an alternative, or perhaps in-room dining becomes more popular on those initial voyages as we start. But indeed, we will see some trends continue to kind of phase in over the next many months that will be relative to what has happened with COVID-19 and how guests and consumers, how their tastes evolve a little bit around that. And I think certainly you can look towards some of the data you get from groups from like the National Restaurant Association or like Technomic, for instance, to gather up some of that good data.
Okay. I will take more minutes to answer some questions because we do have a lot. There's one that says, how do you select your suppliers and how many do you have within Latin America? Which are the most interesting markets for your industry in the region today?
Well, the way that the suppliers are selected are really up to our cruise line members. So, I work for the Global Association for the cruise lines within the food and beverage segment, but we have, really good contact with those folks that are involved in culinary and beverage operations as well as procurement, supply chain. So, essentially, product or solution or service will have to be something that's obviously needed by the cruise line. We can help you get, an initial meeting and kind of where you can summarize, again, how you can become part of that value chain. On the cruise line, there's a whole list of criteria that they work with in terms of having you become listed essentially as a supplier where, when there's an RFP or when they need to place an order, they'll know to go directly to you. So there's quite a process to that. But again, it's something I'm happy to talk about offline.
Okay. And for the last question, Richard, how will food service change under COVID conditions? Previously, there was open access to buffets and to a buffet style with everything being pre-packed. Will everything be pre-packed now? How will this affect quality, perception, experience? I guess, how will fine dining look like now after post-COVID? It's kind of the question.
Yeah, and a little bit of an extension to a few questions ago. Certainly there's going to be changes and there's going to be modifications to the culinary environment, the dining environment. In some cases, buffets will be totally eliminated. Other cruise brands will maintain the buffet environment, but again, have a more restrictive volume of guests within the dining room during any given dining time, if you will. More safeguards put in, the plexiglass and all of the kind of the safeguards that we're seeing on prem and on land-based. So there's all of that. I think technology comes into play as well. I think that there are a lot of applications that are driven on mobile devices where you can place orders for your food and have it delivered to your table. We're really kind of coming into a less touch environment, if you will. So again, many modifications, and it really kind of depends on the brand.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much for your presentation. We will put up Richard's information in our chat, and we will also send it to all our attendees today so you can ask them directly. I know we have a lot of questions concerning how will cruise ships look on board after this coronavirus situation. So yes, thank you, Richard, very much for your presentation. I would like to introduce now the National Restaurant Association show. The National Restaurant Association show is one of the food and hospitality industry's premier events. In 2021, the restaurant show returns with renewed energy as the restaurant community seeks new protocols, new products, technology, concepts, and thought leadership to reimagine food service. The restaurant show is scheduled to take place in May of 2021 in Chicago, Illinois. Joining us today from the restaurant show community, we have two industry experts to discuss the current state of reopening restaurants in the United States. We have James O'Reilly. He's the president and CEO of Smoky Bones, a casual barbecue restaurant chain with over 60 locations across the United States. We have Larry Lynch, Senior Vice President of Certification and Operations at the National Restaurant Association. He also led the development of the Serve Safe Restaurant Reopening Guidance that was released this past May. Moderating the discussion is Heather Alley. She's the editor of Restaurant Business, the leading commercial food service media brand in the U.S. Having said all this, I hand it over to you, Heather. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you so much for joining us today, listeners and panelists. As she said, I'm Heather Lally. I'm an editor at Restaurant Business Magazine, coming to you from very chilly Chicago, Illinois today. We'll start off and talk a bit about how restaurants are working to recover here in the U.S. Let's start off with some questions for James. Can you talk a little bit about the safety measures that you're doing right now at Smoky Bones and how you're communicating those to your customers?
Sure, Heather, and good morning, everyone from South Florida. Of course, the pandemic has changed the way we do business in the restaurant industry, and communicating safety measures to our guests is one of the most important things we can do, because guests in this environment, they need to know what measures restaurant companies are taking, because that really guides their decision-making around what restaurants they might choose to eat in. So at Smoky Bones, we communicate our safety measures both externally, outside the restaurant, and also inside the restaurant. So outside the restaurant, we communicate to our guests and our customers through our website, and through social media, and through email programs, where we explain the different measures that we're taking from a cleanliness, from a safety, from a sanitation standpoint. And then inside the restaurant, Heather, we also communicate all of our practices to our guests through the things that we do and the features that we install, such as multiple sanitation stations, increased signage. And one of the most important things in this area is that guests inside of restaurants, they need to see that you're doing these things. They need to see that you're wiping down the menus. They need to see that you're sanitizing the tables. They need to see that the employees are wearing personal protective equipment, et cetera.
Definitely. So while we're talking about this all-important safety subject, Larry, can you talk a little bit about the National Restaurant Association's first reopening guidance and how that has evolved over time with greater understanding about this virus?
Sure, Heather. Happy to do that. And again, good morning, everybody from sunny Central Florida. So, Heather, I'm sorry to say that you got two of us here that are much warmer environments than you. But that said, first of all, I commend James on what Smoky Bones is doing, because that's exactly the kinds of activities that we've suggested for the restaurant industry. In the very early days of the pandemic, one of the things we did face was the importance of regaining consumer confidence, because there's so much, and there continues to be so much conflicting information coming from so many media sources out there. So we're trying to do everything we can to level the playing field. In the initial stage, part of what we were combating was a little bit of the challenge we had between information coming out of CDC, where they didn't really know at that point in time where we were with the virus. Don't wear face coverings, do wear face coverings. Were they effective? Were they not effective? So the first one took, I think, the best of the information we had, and we were very fortunate. We had experts from the Food and Drug Administration, the CDC, public health, academia, industry, all worked with us to really give us the information that we needed to pull together for that first set of guidance. Subsequent to that, then what we tried to do is look for significant changes in the guidance. There was a small modification that we did in May, and then we just released new guidance a week ago, which looked at a couple of things. One of them was we were starting to see, and again, part of this was designed to create confidence in the consumer, a lot of front of the house glove wearing. And glove wearing is always a challenge. And we were suggesting that let's stay focused on hand hygiene first and foremost, because what often happens is people forget what they're supposed to do in taking off gloves and wearing, properly washing their hands. So that was one piece that we looked at. The big change that we're dealing with now, and there's a lot of information that we still have to get, is this whole idea of air circulation, particularly as we're coming into the colder winter months. Exactly, not only what does it mean and how is it effective, but how risky is it in an indoor environment? Because there's still a lot of debate about aerosol spread of the virus. So each time we turn around and get new information, I was on a long conference call yesterday with HVAC engineers, which is not my background, but it was very interesting to learn some of the things that can and can't be done, the effectiveness of things like UV light on the virus that are combined with the risks of UV light in an indoor environment. So there's still so much to learn. But all of this is designed to make sure that customers feel comfortable. And again, the original purpose of the guidance was to help restaurants across all 50 states. The other big challenge we have here in the U.S. is because the states really do make the decision on what to do. So we had to figure out how to do this across each of those states with different phases of opening, and then be able to come up with guidance that would work across the spectrum of kinds of restaurants, from large quick service facilities down to small mom and pop restaurants, so it could be effective. But so far, we were early with it, and we're going to continue to update that as we get new information.
Sure. And I would assume that the inboxes of restaurant operators and of you, Larry, are as full as mine with, new products that are going to kill the virus and lights to shine and things to spray. And, we need folks like you to kind of help sort that out and figure out what's actually useful.
It's part of my first 2 hours of every day, reviewing them.
Very good. So back to you, James. Larry was touching on this fact that this is such a rapidly changing situation here, particularly in the United States. And there are state rules, and then there are county guidelines, and there are city mandates. How are you communicating that at the team member level to the folks inside your restaurants, James?
Yes, Heather. Well, it starts by having one central source for your company of information. And so we build our guidelines and our protocols for our restaurants from our human resources department. We take all the information that comes from the federal, state, and local guidelines, which, as Larry mentioned, there's a lot of that, and all the information that's coming from the National Restaurant Association into one set of protocols and guidelines for the restaurant. So everyone's working off the same set of protocols and guidelines. And of course, all that information is helpful, and the partnership with the National Restaurant Association is very, very important as a single source of truth for us. So once we have that single source of truth, we communicate that down to the restaurants through our operations organization, so that is all communicated consistently. And then on top of that, we have layered in, since the beginning of the pandemic, weekly live town hall calls with all of our restaurant managers, and there are hundreds of them, all on one call, where all the information, all the updates to the information are communicated to every single one of our managers in real time, and also so that the executive team can answer questions, address any concerns in real time. We also have ongoing 24/7 group chat with all of our restaurant managers in the case of any situations that arise, any questions that they need answered very, very quickly, that the executive team and our support people can be on standby 24/7 for our restaurants.
Very good. Yes. Talking with folks in restaurants, it seems like that open line of communication is just essential right now, since everything is changing so rapidly. So, Larry, to that end, as far as what you know today, what would you say are the 5 best practices that restaurateurs should be focusing on right now?
Yes. So much of that, Heather, depends on, of course, where you are, because that does change things. A lot of the discussion, of course, has always been about outdoor dining. For those of us in Florida, it's the time of year for us now to do outdoor dining. But if you're in Chicago and colder locales, that's not it. So it really is, first and foremost, to me, the most important thing you can do is to make sure that your restaurant is as ready as it can be with what you know today. And that means if it's air circulation, what's the most effective way of doing that? How do I keep things clean and moving in the restaurant? How do I communicate with my customers to make sure that they're aware of everything I'm doing? James mentioned that was a big piece of what Smoky Bones is doing, and that's critical so that customers understand why it's safe to go in and eat. Of course, the original piece we always talk about is the basics of making sure that you're wearing face coverings, making sure that you've designed it for proper social distancing, not just for your employees, but for your customers as well. Do those health checks to make sure that the employees, when they come into work, are healthy. And again, you're communicating all of that. So it's coming out and making sure people see that you're practicing all of that on a regular basis, in your restaurant. I think if you design that, and one of the things we said early on, when this pandemic hit, we were in cold weather season then. We were, February, March time frame. The restaurant industry pretty quickly pivoted to a takeout and delivery methodology because they had no choice. And many, many restaurants did that. That was kind of the early part of when we developed the first set of guidance. There was still the confusion around face covering at the time, and we suggested, wear face coverings anyhow, because we recognized that in the kitchens, trying to keep 6 feet of distance is extremely difficult, in some cases almost impossible. But we had heard in discussions with the CDC that there was that element of protection from you giving it to somebody else. If everybody's wearing one, you add that layer of protection. And quite frankly, you look back to that time frame, there were no outbreaks of COVID-19 coming from restaurant kitchens where employees were wearing face coverings and were social distancing as best they possibly could. And I think that's carried forward. Our argument has been that there's no evidence of systemic outbreaks coming from restaurants that, again, that are practicing the guidance, that are doing the very things that Smoky Bones is doing to make sure that that's there. So we have to make sure that message gets out to the public and again, public officials, because it's easy to say, look, it's the restaurants that are creating the problem. And that's what I think we're on a regular fight. So if restaurants just make sure they're doing what the proper practices are today and they're communicating that out there, I think those are the most effective things that they can do right now. And that communication has to be at the government level as well as with consumers, because government officials have to hear from somebody, and who better than the very people who are trying to do it right.
Certainly. So with this rapid pivot to delivery and takeout operations, we're seeing a lot of concepts develop what we're calling ghost kitchens and virtual brands. These are kitchens that are solely designed for takeout and delivery. Sometimes they're in a place where there is no dine-in seating at all, and there's just a door for a third-party delivery person to show up. James, I know your brand has been really active in that space. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing?
Sure, Heather. Well, in response to the way consumers are consuming their restaurant meals so much more often now, not inside the restaurant, but rather in their own homes. Looking at that trend, which has been accelerated by the pandemic, we invested in two types of new off-premise business opportunities. The ghost kitchen is a delivery-only kitchen that serves our menu to guests. But with no restaurant, no four walls, only a kitchen where the customer can order their food online and have it delivered either by us or by one of the third-party platforms. And so that's been a very successful strategies being implemented across the industry. We also started two new what are called virtual brands, which exist only in the third-party marketplace, such as Uber Eats and DoorDash. And what these are sections of our menu that we have rebranded specifically to those sections of our menus. So, for example, we created a virtual brand around our chicken wings and one around our burgers, because those are products that we are not that well known for, but we have excellent products. We want people to know about them. So we created what are called virtual brands. They're called the Wing Experience and the Burger Experience, both on Uber Eats and DoorDash. And those are ways to get incremental sales on product categories and make them more prominent to our guests who are using these third-party platforms.
Good. Yes, we're seeing a lot of that here in the States for sure. So, Larry, especially where I am in a very chilly part of the country, there's a lot of interest in trying to extend our outdoor dining season as long as possible. And operators are trying all sorts of very creative things, from, kind of like ice fishing huts that folks can dine in, to igloos. But there's some debate about the safety of those and the airflow and, what kind of structure is best. Do you have any thoughts on that and how people can continue outdoor dining as safely as possible?
We've certainly been looking at options to help some of our members with heating options that could work in an outdoor facility. And again, in Chicago, that's always going to be a challenge. I think anywhere that you're going to be looking at something like an igloo, for example, and I've seen many of those advertised, they've been among the morning emails that I get. It has to show some kind of air circulation. I've seen pictures of people sitting in them wearing coats and gloves, and I'm not sure that's the most effective way to do it. I still come back to finding that way to develop the right kind of air circulation. Our most current guidance, if you think about your own home, for example, what we're suggesting is making sure that if you own the building or if you can go to your landlord, get your air conditioning unit serviced. In other words, make it so that it's the most effective at drawing out air. If it can go up as high as a MERV 13 filter, that's the highest level filter that will be able to contain the virus. Get the MERV 13 filter so it's pulling the air out. And then make sure that environment is one where the air circulation is there, that people are distanced properly, the customers are distanced properly. Customers play a role in this as well. They've got to make sure that they're maintaining their health. They know what their health status is, that they're wearing face coverings. I would argue that the indoor experience can be a safe one. Well, what's interesting, and we're seeing, and I'm sure James is seeing that here in Florida as well, is that a lot of what they're pointing to is what's happening indoors in people's homes. So the irony of this is that as we're coming into this season, we're finding more risk of people, because they do let their guard down in people's homes. We're coming into Thanksgiving season. We're coming into the holiday season. That the real concern is that the risk is in the home, but the actions are being taken against the restaurants. So it's just critical for the restaurants to take that time to demonstrate exactly what they're doing. We don't know yet exactly what the risk is coming from aerosol transmission. I'm talking with the experts on a regular basis. The studies are underway. And again, I always tell people I'm not going to geek out on the kinds of things that I'm learning about this, but in essence, they can't point to a long-term risk. It is still saying, look, close contact, and CDC is adjusting their guidance even on what's close contact now. It's still coming from droplets, that larger volume that comes out of you, which typically is large conversations. And if you think about a holiday at home with people not wearing masks and hugging and shouting and watching football on television here in the U.S., that's where your risk is going to be. So as we come into these winter months, I think if restaurants can really tell that story of developing, and whether it's portable air units or the air circulation, just demonstrate to public officials and to the public and to the consumers the things you're doing so that what they're hearing out there. If they're hearing that the restaurants are risky because there's poor air circulation, show what you're doing to circulate air. If you're still concerned about masks, demonstrate to them what your policies and procedures are, that your employees are wearing them, and do that. It's going to be the most effective way. I'm concerned that igloos are nice. As a consumer, I'm not sure I'd sit in an igloo too long to have a meal. So more than we can do to protect the diners indoors, the better off we're going to be this winter.
Definitely agree. It gets a little tricky in areas where they are shutting down indoor dining. So it seems like operators need to kind of have a plan B and C. And
exactly, and that's the problem: is they're shutting it down. They're pointing to restaurants and closing the restaurants. The issues are coming from people's homes, and that's what we've got to figure out how to address.
Sure. So to switch topics a little bit, we have talked to operators who have said that the pace of restaurant technology has, in the last 5 months or whatever, has accelerated 5 years in such a short amount of time. This is for either of you. What sort of new technologies are you seeing on the horizon? James, has your concept implemented any sort of new tech to get through this period?
Well, there are two types of technologies that we're spend the most time talking about and looking at investing in right now. One is facility-based technology up in the HVAC space, and also which is more structural and facility related, and also in the consumer-facing space around temperature taking and just being aware of the health and safety of our guests and of our employees. So that's one technology area we're spending an awful lot more time as we need to thinking about, talking about, and making investment decisions for. And then the second area of technology that we're very focused on talking about is consumer-facing online ordering and e-commerce technology, because so many guests now are choosing to eat their meals at home. We still want to make sure that those guests who are eating their meals at home are having a very good experience with our restaurant brand. And for them to have a great experience with the restaurant brand, that means the website, the online ordering, the e-commerce, the mobile platforms, all of those platforms need to be very, very competitive. And casual dining is a segment of the restaurant industry where the technology was not as far ahead as it was in other areas of the restaurant industry, such as the pizza segment, for example. So the casual dining industry is very focused, and our company is very focused on improving our guest-facing technology to make that online ordering experience really great, and also looking at our facilities technology to do everything we can to protect the health and safety of our guests and of our employees.
And Heather, let me add to that, because I think James is right on target. There's old world technology that restaurants can still use as well. For example, if you're making a reservation or you need to understand where the restaurant is in terms of seating and availability, text messaging is a phenomenal way to do that. It's as simple as the restaurant reaching out to the consumer and having a discussion with, saying it's time to come in. Here's your time. Everything's set. I'm going to sit in my car and wait till that option is there. I think the other thing Smoky Bones is doing with communicating with their clients on their website. Clients want to know. One of the things we launched at ServeSafe earlier this year was the ServeSafe dining commitment. And part of that is just we're asking restaurants to commit to our guidance. There's a very brief video training series that we created for our guidance for takeout, for delivery. It's all free. Doing that, making sure that you have a certified manager on the premises, making sure that your key staff is trained in food handling. And then with that, we give you a digital component that you can put up on your website to demonstrate that you even have third-party independent review of what you do. So there's old world technology too. I think there's plenty of things to invest. I think some people get worried about the cost of those technological investments, but think old school, because sometimes that works too.
That's great, Larry.
Definitely. I've been talking to a fair number of restaurant operators recently about what they're doing to monitor the health of their employees right now, and make sure that they are keeping their, restaurants safe while also not infringing on, the privacy of their workers. James, can you talk about anything that you're doing in your shops? And Larry, maybe touch upon the industry-wide kind of best practices for monitoring employee health.
Well, sure. To start, the first step for us in ensuring the health of our employees, which also extends to the health and safety of our guests, obviously, is their education and their training. And so taking all that information we have from these federal, state, and local authorities and the National Restaurant Association, turning that into a thorough training program that all of our employees need to certify with is step one. And then step two, as every employee clocks in for every shift, every single time, we take their temperature and we ask them to certify. We don't need to know their specifics, but we ask them to certify that they are feeling good, that they've not experienced any symptoms, that they've not been around anyone who's experienced any symptoms. And we make sure that every employee certifies to that before every single shift. And so the combination of the training, the understanding, and then also the due diligence for us as an employer to protect not only our employees' safety, but also the health and safety of our guests, which is so paramount, that is an ongoing everyday process for us.
And Heather, let me build on that a little bit, because I think James has really nailed every piece of what we've suggested that people do. We also suggested for many restaurants, particularly the smaller ones or independents that have just opened, make sure they develop policies and procedures. I think that's where a lot of smaller restaurants tend to struggle, is they don't understand all the nuances of things like HIPAA, if they're going to be taking temperatures. And most importantly, then develop a set of checklists and you make sure that when employees are coming in, that they have done some self-monitor, they are reporting, you understand where they've been and what the risks are to themselves, what the risks are to the other employees, and of course, what the risks are to the customers. But I think just building on everything that James just said, I think that again, a policy and procedure that's current, it may be in a small investment working with either a local human resources firm or perhaps a lawyer who is well-versed in the current law, is critically important to where the restaurant needs to be to safely do this. Then create your checklist, create your policies and then make sure that the employees follow them.
Well, thank you to both of you. I've found this to be a really fascinating discussion, and I think we hit on most of the questions I had. Was there anything else, James or Larry, that you wanted to touch on today?
I'll defer to James on the start, and then I'll finish it up.
Probably just reemphasize to everyone that the importance of communication, and it sometimes sounds like a bit of a cliche, but two-way communication with the restaurants at a time like this, when you're talking about issues as important as health and safety, you just cannot overstate that. Running a restaurant company cannot overstate the importance of, number one, communicating them, training them, educating them, and number two, providing them with a channel back to you in real time in the event that anything happens that they need help, that you're there for them and you're there to support them. So that communication, the importance of that just is paramount.
And then, Heather, I'll build on that a little bit in as much as I think it's important that everyone stay on top of what's happening and the changes. This is a virus that we know so little about, yet we've seen so much progress in terms of therapeutics and the potential of vaccines only since March. I mean, if you think about our communication back in March, we were thinking late 21, maybe 22 before we see anything, and now we're talking down to a matter of months. But there are still changes and things we don't know about. What we're trying to do as the National Restaurant Association is coalesce all that information. I'm on the phone with the CDC once, twice, sometimes 3 times a week because I get questions from members. Turn to us too. I think restaurants can feel comfortable coming and saying, and I just had this the other day where a restaurant association had a public health official hit them with a statistic that none of us has seen. And I vetted it with 4 or 5 other public health officials to see if I missed something. And then we're able to draft a reply to them so they understand. The biggest challenge I think we're going to continue to have is the misinformation out there, the interpretation. CDC will come out with something that looks relatively innocuous. Media will pick up the headline only and miss the guts of it. We saw that a few weeks ago where there was a report that came out that restaurants were significantly more risky than any place else to go. And they compared 314 people in the United States. That was it out of 10 states. So we were able to quickly debunk the science behind that. I will tell you, that study was so bad, even the CDC told me it was bad. But that said, that doesn't stop the media from picking it up. I will tell you that we are resolute in staying on top of this, communicating the right things. We still have a ways to go. And I think the most important thing that people can do is pay attention to that because there are safe ways to operate. And we're going to continue to push that message out there and provide the guidance to get restaurants to that point.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your time, and thank you all for listening. I am not sure if we had any questions from the audience, but I will turn it back over to our host.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, James. Well, before I read out some questions that did come in, I wanted to say that it was an honor to have the National Restaurant Association show with us, as well as the Cruise Line Association, and as guest speakers today in Horeca Challenge. As trade show organizers of Alimentech, we would obviously love to partner with you guys in this developing the food and beverage industry together. For this reason, I would like to invite you all and all of our attendees to visit our show in June. I think it would be a great opportunity to meet new suppliers and food manufacturers in our local markets. So yes, it's an honor to have you all, and thank you very much for your intervention. I will now read some questions that did come up. We have one from Angela Suarez. She says, how do you see the winter will affect the industry? I think it was kind of answered, but for you guys, how will winter affect in case of Colombia? Because we are currently in our rainy season. So maybe if you could give us some tips on that. How will winter affect?
Well, I'll start, Larry. We've organized our restaurants already in accordance with all the guidelines around social distancing and spacing of our tables, the sanitation procedures that we put in place, the training and education of our employees. So, and I assume that's going to make all of those things will maintain throughout the winter season. So, we'll be ready with all those procedures and protocols as we are today. And we continue to keep our tables and our seats at appropriate distances and keep our employees, our restaurant teams very focused on the health and the safety of not only themselves, but also our guests.
And Alexander, I would add to that even in Colombia, I think if you follow the same procedures in Colombia that we're following here in the U.S., there's very little differentiation between what the World Health Organization is saying and what our CDC is saying. The one thing that I hear consistently, in addition to the social distancing, is the wearing of face coverings. And I think every public health official who has credibility has said if people would just, both customers and employees across the spectrum of business, would just wear the face coverings, we could get past this as we wait for a vaccine. So I would strongly suggest, much as Smoky Bones is doing in terms of the separation, the work they're doing, wear those face coverings, and I think you'll do a lot to get through the season.
Okay.
Yeah, all of our employees wear face coverings. They even have the company brand name on them, right, like this. And we're very, it's a great opportunity. But yeah, very, very important. All of our employees.
I have to add, I love when James said that, because I hear people objecting to face coverings. I also use mine as a marketing tool, and I'm saying, where else can you wear something that markets your business on a day-to-day basis? Why would you not do it?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we have another question. It says, which controls are important in service like buffets or salad sections in terms of food safety and temperature?
I'll go ahead and take that one, because that's one that we've been hit with a lot. What we have suggested is that you set it up cafeteria style. When I say cafeteria style, it means you have an employee who's properly wearing protective equipment, gloves, obviously gloves that are changed on a regular basis. This is in front of the house, as well as face coverings. And then you social distance the people in the lines for the buffet sections. And so you're actually the only one, your employee that's handling the food, the condiments, servicing. And so basically the customer walks away with a plate in hand and back to the table. The table's already set with any of the disposable serviceware. We think that's the safest way to do it. And certainly the buffets that we know that we've been working with seem to be doing that quite successfully.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. We have one more question. It says, will this recording? Yeah, we will share the recording. Let me see. I'm trying to check here. Okay, it says, what types of outdoor structures are being employed? That's Joe Franklin's question.
I can start with a few things that we have done. We established, especially when our dining rooms were closed, we established what we call pop-up drive-throughs, so consumers could order and pick up their meals from us without ever getting out of their car. Kept our employees obviously in PPE, but we could and wearing masks, and we could hand the food off to our guests. We also strengthened our curbside delivery capability, and in some cases where we wanted more seating capacity, we set up actually catering-style tents in our parking lots with appropriately spaced tables underneath these tents. And so we put some of those structures up in situations where we needed more capacity, and we were able to do it that way, and that was very helpful as well.
Yeah, and Alexander, I think it comes down to how cold it's going to be and where you are, because it's going to be what the customer can withstand in terms of temperature. I will give you my own personal thing. I love going out to San Diego and California, and sometimes even in July, the San Diego temperature can get down to the 50s or 60s. I happen to love that as a time to be sitting outdoor under a heat lamp and enjoying a meal. Again, as I said earlier, I think we're seeing a lot of innovation. And who knows, maybe someone will come with an igloo that's got perfect air circulation and the right temperature, and they can put it out front. Who knows? I mean, inventions seem to be born of crises, and we're certainly seeing that at this point in time. But I think as they're pointing to this risk of air circulation, I think everybody just needs to be a little bit smart. I think some of the things that James is talking about, that Smoky Bones is doing, and again, there's great outdoor heating systems, but again, you have to be realistic. To Heather's point, I'm not sure I'd be sitting in a 20-degree snowstorm in Chicago having a heating system that would work. And that's why, again, I come back to the importance of doing everything you can inside your restaurant to set up a protective environment, face coverings, distancing, and the basics of air circulation at this point as we know it.
Okay, well, I actually have a question here that says from Edna Martinez. I think she says, the people that serve need to cover their mouth and nose or face cover completely for COVID. I think you answered yes. Is there something more that air filters like UV lighting that we can put on our restaurants?
Let me start with that one, because UV light can be effective against the coronavirus, against COVID-19. The problem is there's also a host of issues with UV light. Anything from the air itself, the ozone in the air, right down to the potential of damage to people, damage to surfaces. Unless you know exactly what you're doing with ultraviolet light, I strongly suggest, if you have an established process with UV light and it works and you're using it, great. If you're new to it and it's this host of inventions I'm seeing coming across the internet right now, I think you may want to get an engineering specialist that can advise you on how to use it. It's good, but it's risky. One of the things that I saw recently, which I thought was interesting, are these portable air circulation units that use both high MERV, the high MERV 13 filters, as well as UV light inside the unit, so it cleans the air in a double fashion before it recirculates it. Might be safe. I haven't seen any. Again, this call I was on yesterday, I didn't hear if it was the perfect solution, but I think people are understanding. Let's find the right combination. But UV light, maybe, but there's a lot of things around it that you have to be very, very careful about. Is Smoky Bones doing anything with UV?
No, not at the moment. We're focused just on the quality of our HVAC and our filtration. And we take our guidance from the National Restaurant Association and Larry's team. So
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I will read one last question, and then we will have all your information posted in the chat so that you guys can be contacted directly. This one is a more general question. It says, how has the lockdown changed what we eat and our preferences in choosing a restaurant? I guess maybe how are people tendencies now into walking into one restaurant and not into another? That's kind of what the question is.
Well, I can start. I mean, number one, consumers, when they're choosing restaurants today, the importance of knowing that the restaurant is thinking about and is taking concrete actions with their health and safety in mind is at the absolute top of the restaurant guests, list of things that they think about when choosing a restaurant. Number one, whether that be for dine-in or takeout, even they want to know that the restaurant is doing everything they can to keep their health and safety in mind. And number two, guests are migrating towards comfort food. They love comfort food at a time like this because it's an uncertain time. And so the restaurant industry has a superb opportunity to provide guests with everything that they're looking for. And of course, I'm proud of my teams at Smoky Bones and each and every one of our restaurant teams that create that great comfort food each and every day and send that out to our guests.
And I couldn't agree more. I mean, it is all about communicating the safety of going out to eat. I think if people were to walk in and see it crowded, they'd probably walk right back out. I went out and had dinner with a friend last night, and the two of us made sure that we knew where we were going. We asked all the questions. They had patio seating, but I think we probably follow what most consumers tend to do. Let me look at the website. Let's call, let's see, and then let's observe. It was interesting when we arrived. The parking lot was more crowded than we expected it to be. And when we walked inside, the server, as they were walking us, and they had no idea that both of us were in the National Restaurant Association, was explaining to us as they were walking us to the table all the things they were doing to protect the people that were coming into the restaurant. That's how you do it right.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I don't have any questions. Well, we have two more, but I think we'll just give your information in the chat so that they contact you directly. Thank you very much, Heather and Larry and James. We will now have our final speaker for this Horeca challenge. I would like to welcome Guillermo Enrique Gomez. He's the Executive President of the Colombian Association of Gastronomy. Let's see if we can have the information yet. Mr. Gomez will be speaking about the current state and reopening of restaurants in Colombia. Before I turn it over to Mr. Gomez, I wanted to mention that in Alimentec, our trade show happening in June, we have more than 9 industry sectors exhibiting in our show, starting from fine foods, snacks and confectionery, fresh fruits, vegetables, dairies, and many others. So please do check on our webpage for more information and how to participate. We now welcome Mr. Guillermo Gomez. Bienvenido. Guillermo? Guillermo, can you hear us? Guillermo? Give him 1 second. I think he's having a little trouble with his connection.
He's mute.
Okay, Guillermo. Guillermo, can you unmute yourself, please?
No, no puede. Guillermo, activo.
Okay, before he connects, I want to make sure that you all know that our trade show has been rescheduled to June 8th to the 11th. Our webpage will be updated. This has been recently announced to all of our exhibitors and our Colmesa team, so please do have that in mind. I want to just to make sure that you guys have it, that our new date is in June. This because of the travel restrictions that we're facing today, and most of our exhibitors are not able to fly for the beginning of next year when it was scheduled. Second to see if Guillermo is being able to connect. Guillermo?
Hi, Alexandra.
Hi, Guillermo. I think we can't see you. Maybe if you can put the video on.
I'm trying to find the key.
Okay, it's in the bottom part where it says mute. Donde está la crucecita across.
All right.
Yeah. There we go. Welcome, Guillermo.
Thank you. Hello, everybody from Bogota, Colombia. I'm Guillermo Gomez. I'm the current president of the Colombian Association of the Gastronomic Industry. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm gonna share my screen with you.
Guillermo, can you see the share? Maybe share content next to start video.
No me habilita el botón de share, está oculto.
¿Tú tienes un Mac? You have a Mac?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I think it's going to be...
Tienes que darle permisos, Guillermo, desde el Mac primero, entrar como a Settings y ahí en Privacy tienes que darle el permiso a Cisco de Recording Video, Recording Screen, perdón.
Sorry for that. We're having some technical issues. Let's give some minutes to Guillermo.
Alex, Guillermo's going to send you the presentation, okay? So maybe you can share it from your computer. That's the way.
Guillermo, I don't know if you want to start telling us a little bit about yourself and maybe while I get the presentation. Okay, there we go. Okay, while we wait, I want to say that, remind everybody that Alimentec is our sister trade show of Anuga. As you all know, Anuga is the most important trade show in the world for food and beverage, and Alimentec is sister show here in the Andean region. So we will have exhibitors coming from all parts of the world and visitors and professional buyers. So please also remember that we are part of the Anuga family here in Latin America. Guillermo, if you want, I can share the presentation. Would you like me to share it? I don't have it in my email. Guillermo?
Alex, please send him an email so he can reply to you. I'm really sorry for this technical issue. He's having troubles with the computer.
Guillermo, can you hear us? Guillermo?
Well,
Guillermo? Okay, well, unfortunately, I think we're not going to be able to have Guillermo's presentation. We are having some technical issues. We will definitely be inviting Guillermo to our next Horeca Challenge. Guillermo, can you hear us?
Yes, I do. I'm here.
Do you want to say something, even if your presentation is not up, or share with us a little bit of your experience with the restaurants in Colombia?
Well, there's no problem. I'm gonna introduce you the context and perspective of the restaurant sector in Colombia. First of all, Colombia is the market of 46 million people, of which 8 million have purchasing power. In this context, the restaurant sector registered annual sales of $2.4 billion per year and generate 500,000 direct jobs. The isolation measures left definitive closures in 48,000 of the 90,000 gastronomic establishments that exist in our country, with 290 jobs disappearing. The Colombian Association of the Gastronomic Industry, ACODRES, negotiated with the government a series of measures that materialized in 10 direct benefits for companies. First of all, the exception from the payment of 8% tax on the sale of restaurants for 6 months. The second one, the exception of 19% sales tax for franchise restaurants for 6 months. Then the exception from the payment of fiscal contribution to tourism for 9 months, the exception from rental tax for 2 months, the reduction on 2/3 of the fine for return on business location, the exception of the rent advance 220, the suspension of royalty collection for copyrights to close establishment, the elimination of time restrictions for delivery services, a 40% payroll subsidy from June to August, and a 50% from September to March, enabling the takeaway purchase mode and the insurance of biosafety protocols. Being a highly informal sector, only 20% of the gastronomic establishment complied with the payment of taxes and requirements of the law. It offers a kindness with scope for most of the country's socioeconomic sectors, such as the opportunity to reactivate financially on account of the preparation of food and beverage. In principle, the impact of gastronomy in the daily life of the country was a profound impact. The tradition of the various cultures that come together in the Colombian nation maintains food as an object of love in human relationships. The expression and affection depends on the amount of food that is served on the plates. This cultural reality opens up options for many people who were left out of the formal and informal labor market with the crisis and projects a message of solidarity and promotion of the local. This is so important, understanding the link between local food and people's lives and reconnecting it with the oration projected by the industry for a couple of decades. ACODRES was founded in 1957. It was only until the end of the 90s that restaurants began to understand the franchise model, and the ground was prepared for the strengthening of a highly varied and versatile range of prepared meals and beverage. In 2002 and 2015, the growth of the sector was above the national economy and managed to show a potential capable of making the country the third gastronomic destination in Latin America, reaching conditions similar to those of Mexico and Peru. The necessity of workers in the restaurant sector will help to the recovery of employment in such a way that we not only take care of rehire the 280,000 workers we lost, but also other Colombians' interest in recovering their lives productive. For that reason, in agreement with the SINA, a public entity of education, we developed an academic offer with virtual access and 100% free that allows workers in the sector to be update and learn skills that enable them to return soon or enter the industry. Colombian restaurants were particularly reluctant to implement technological solutions for the operation and develop virtual spaces. With the pandemic, they were forced to allow digital and technological tools to enter their operation. The operation is the most recognized chain. Franchise and groups not only strengthened these aspects, but also led to the activation of business models that had already had a timid activation in the country without achieving sufficient reception to lead to their consolidation. These are the cloud kitchens or ghost kitchens, today favorable to the fast food segment that have greater adaptability to home schemes than the rest of the categories. The vet of these models tries to grow in adverse conditions, seeing an opportunity of location, efficiency, and highly competitive price. Its growth is also an attempt by the entrepreneurs who entered the restaurant segment to save the effort that was lost in the pandemic. Another option that invites you to strengthen this strip is the rental of kitchens or shared kitchens. This innovation and new modalities are here to stay, but we think that they cannot replace the model of table service and self-service. The Latino culture is one of the personal treatment, interaction, and a more open relationship when compared to cultures from other latitudes. Although the consumer trend is affected by the pandemic, the end of it will lead the majority of the public to want to return to the exercise of trying gastronomic environments and experience through daily channels of those driven by tourism. Colombia being the most...
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have your presentation. Would you like us to project it?
Oh, that's good. It's a better condition to introduce.
Okay. 1 second, please. Let me try to do this. And okay, let me see. And what slide are you currently?
The third one.
Okay. 1 second. Share content, please. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Sorry,
Thank
everybody.
you so much.
Finally shared.
That's important. Thank you so much. A quality of our country is that Colombia, being the most biodiverse country in the world per square kilometer, has an enormous horizon of exploration, research, and innovation in the restaurant sector, which leaves it with a wide spectrum of development. Please, the next one. Thank you. In 2019, Acodres hosted a 12-day traditional Colombian food event, and it was highly successful. Sabores Colombia, Flavors Colombia brought together the best of the country's indigenous culinary techniques and offered select dishes that were very well received by visitors. With digital components, the event is preparing to return and to motivate the promotion of Colombian gastronomic heritage, a fundamental ingredient to continue advancing the purpose of maturing local restaurants. Please, the next one, the last one. Thank you. No doubt, the crisis deeply affected the restaurant segment, but at the same time, it called it to better organize itself to respond to a captive market. In the event that there are no more closures of quarantine measures in Colombia, Acodres estimates that active businesses can regain their pre-pandemic sales levels in April 2021. This is a resume of all the perspective and context that we can introduce and explain by our presence in all of this hard period to our industry. This is our presentation, Alexandra. Sir, thank you so much.
Thank you, Guillermo, and please excuse all of you for this inconvenience with our technical issues in our presentation. But thank you, Guillermo, for your conference and your presentation, and thank you all. We don't have currently any questions for Guillermo. If not, we will be sending all your information so they can contact you directly. Thank you all for helping us. This will finish, so this will be the end of our Horeca Challenge for today. We appreciate you all for attending, and we hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you again, and we hope you have an amazing day after this. Thank you. We will send you all the information over guest speakers. Thank you, Guillermo. Thank you all from the National Restaurant Association show and from Richard from the Cruise Lines Association show. Bye. Thank you.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye.